Imagine children at the age of 10 to 12 years losing their childhood just because they were trafficked out of their home country into another country with the promise of education, better life, paid services or paid labor, without them even knowing what they are in for. These children were taken from their home countries in Mali into Ivory Coast. So this is the story of the 8 Malian boys whose lawsuit were recently dismissed by the United States Federal Court in Washington, D.C. This is one of the things or one of the issues that happens in Africa or most part of the world, where forced labor are used on children to produce what the world loves most, especially in the case of these Malian boys who were producing cocoa for companies in the United States that needs cocoa to produce chocolate. Most of the luxurious items or most of the loved things being used by most people in the world, most of the raw materials are produced under forced labor, trafficked out of their home at the tender age of 10, some of them at 12 years, forced to work in cocoa farms in Ivory Coast. Recently they filed a lawsuit, or in 2001 they filed a lawsuit against the multinational companies that produces chocolates like the Nestle, Hershey, Cajil, Olam, many of the multinational companies that produces chocolate. So how did it all start? This started in 2005 when these young children were forced or deceived by the middlemen in their home country in Mali, taken to Ivory Coast to farm. We were unpaid, unsafe, far from home, 14 hours a day to work, with a threat that if you move an inch, you'll be killed. So chocolate is a product of cocoa beans, which is primarily produced or grown in most tropical climates, especially in West Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Western African countries like Ghana, Ivory Coast supply about 70% of the world cocoa products. It is believed that there has been a rise in chocolate industry, and that means more demand for cocoa products. This has ultimately resulted into more children being recruited, forced into labor, worst form of child labor. These children were sold into slavery. So came 2021, these boys, now adults, who claimed they were trafficked as children and forced to work on cocoa farms in Ivory Coast, filed a lawsuit against the chocolate companies, these giant chocolate companies, Nestle, Cajil, Mondelez, Olam, under the Allentown statute that allows foreign nationals to bring human rights cases into American courts. The case states that these companies were complicit in the child slavery because these companies supported and benefit from the cocoa supplies. They claimed they were trafficked and forced to work long, enduring hours without pay. So here is the supply chain, how it works typically. The local farmers produces and sells to traders or cooperatives, and the traders or cooperatives sells to the processors or the exporters, and these exporters sells to the multinational companies who are always in demand for this cocoa produce for their companies. The names or the farms which these boys alleged or claimed that they worked in while in Ivory Coast are still unnamed or undisclosed in the court filings up till now. Why? Because most of the supply chain of cocoa in West Africa is deeply fragmented and still opaque up till today. So the lawsuit was focused mainly on the chocolate companies because looking at the complexity of the cocoa supply chain in West Africa, naming specific farm requires direct evidence which the Malian plaintiffs likely didn't have or could not prove in the law courts. But claimed that they worked on various farms. These farms are situated in major cocoa producing zones in Ivory Coast. The plaintiff's case argues that even though these farms are not owned directly by the chocolate companies in the United States, that there has been a long-standing supplier-buyer relations maintained by these chocolate companies and the farms. This case was filed in 2021, so up to 2023, the US Supreme Court declined to hear the case. Well, why? Why they turned down? Not because the abuse did not happen, but the US court found out or submitted that the case or the plaintiffs do not have enough substantial evidence to hold against the US companies, and that the plaintiffs could not prove that these US companies has direct control over the farms that in Ivory Coast in West Africa where the abuse took place. Also, these chocolate companies has also come up to deny any wrongdoing, claiming that they're advocating or they have a charter that is already standing out to eliminate child labor in their supply chain. But that has not stopped child labor in the supply chain of the cocoa produced to these chocolate companies, because a study by the Knock University in 2020 shows that 1.5 million children are still doing child labor in West Africa alone. Most of these children who are subjected to child labor work under harsh and hazardous conditions, like working with machete and heavy chemicals. And critics argues that most of these big giant chocolate companies have had enough in profit, billions and billions in profits, to implement change, but still allows these children to wallow in harsh child labor productions. Like said earlier, most of the world's luxurious products comes from the use or pens of most laborers who are not even able to enjoy most of the labors they go through to produce luxury for others. So especially children are not supposed to go through child labor to produce world most loved food, chocolate. So is it worth it that most of these children being used in West Africa to produce world most beloved food like chocolate, is their pains and their labor going through these harsh conditions worth it? Child labor has also been seen commonly used in other places like gold mines, where children are found working in hazardous conditions, or in gold mines where chemicals are used. Well, so far so good. Well, drop your comment in the comment sections. In this channel, I like talking about things I find interesting about Africa. Do not forget to subscribe. See you on the next one. Thank you for watching.